I've been working on computer systems for approaching 40 years or more. Holy smoke, am I old. Anyway, the bottom line is that I would say that more than 50% of every problem I've run into on every type of individual computer or network, or wherever it might be, could be boiled down to malware. And that's what this episode is all about. What I want to do is talk about what is malware and the different types of malware that we see out there. And then I'm going to leave it to Dan to talk about things like, I don't know, cleaning it up. Anyway, when we talk about malware, first of all, malware simply means software that in one way or another is detrimental to the operation of a host. That's really all it is. Now, if you go way back in the old days, pretty much all malware started off with something called a virus. Now, virus is kind of an old-fashioned term these days, although it's still accurate for some stuff out there. A virus is a program that has two functions in life. Number one, it has to replicate. Somehow, this program will replicate itself over and over again. A traditional virus can't just replicate itself. It usually needs some user to click on it or to download it and start a program or something to get the actual virus up and running. Now, once the virus is running, it's in memory one way or another, then it can make copies of itself and connect to executable files, dynamic link libraries, stuff like that. But the important thing to remember about a virus is that viruses literally predate the internet. And back in the old days, they were copied by people putting them accidentally on floppy disks and things like that. So it's a little bit dated, but it's on the exam. So number one, a virus can replicate. Number two, a virus can activate. And when a virus activates, well, back in the old days, it could do funny things like make all the letters on your screen fall down to the bottom, or it could do something nefarious like erase your hard drive. But all viruses have some form of activation. We also have certain types of viruses that we call a fileless malware or a fileless virus. In essence, it's saying there is no file. Now, I always thought that was strange because viruses in and of themselves usually start off with some little executable program, and the virus itself just kind of connects itself to the end. So the executable program's like, here, draw the screen and go, then at the end the virus goes, and make a copy of me on 6 other files. So when we talk about a fileless piece of malware, a fileless virus, what we're saying is it probably started with something on an executable file, but now it just sits in RAM and it tries to connect itself to anything it possibly can. So viruses, definitely not a good thing. Second is what I call ransomware, but on the exam, be ready for words like crypto malware and crypto ransomware. Basically, what we're talking about here is a virus that does something naughty to your system. Like, for example, it could take a copy of your entire boot sector and put it somewhere else. And then every time you boot up your computer, the only thing that comes up is a screen saying, if you ever want to see your data again, send through Bitcoin to this particular address. And they really will, if you pay the ransom, they really will go ahead and put your system back to its normal state. Better idea is just don't let it happen in the first place. And again, I'll save it for Dan to talk about all that type of stuff. Okay, the next type of malware I want to talk about is a worm. A worm it's still a virus, but whereas a virus counts on people clicking on it or something like that for replication, a worm, once it gets started, will use networking and or the internet to replicate itself. Now, this can be done a lot of different ways. For example, it's not uncommon to see a worm that gets an email, and then all of a sudden, it grabs every email address in your contact list and starts sending them evil emails so that it can just keep replicating like that over and over again. Most of the malware that we run into today are really worms. So to me, worm isn't so much a type of malware as it is a pathway for me to replicate. Either way is fine. Next is a Trojan horse. Now, when I'm talking about a Trojan horse, yeah, I am talking about the classic Trojan horse from Greek mythology. Is it mythology, though? And in this situation, what you're talking about, it's not a virus. A Trojan, actually we rarely say Trojan horse, we say Trojan. A Trojan is simply a program that looks like one thing but does another. So you might have a program that's like free software to do cool something, or a free game. So you fire up this program, you play a game, but in the meantime, it's doing something evil in the background. So that's really what a Trojan is. Trojans by themselves do not have a replication tool built into them. They just count on people being dumb. All right. The next one is a remote access Trojan, or a rat. Remote access Trojans, or rats, are very popular for people who want to take control of something remotely. So what I can do is I can get you to run this groovy game that you like. Might be a race car game, say, but in the meantime, it gives me remote desktop control of your system. So rats are used all over the place. You actually see them sometimes in denial of service types of attacks as well. Next, which is related to a Trojan, is a backdoor. Now, a backdoor doesn't necessarily mean it's a Trojan. A Trojan usually has some nefarious evilness to it that goes along with whatever you think it's supposed to do. Backdoor is simply a feature, now we see this in Trojans a lot, where the program is a good program. Let's say you go out and buy some accounting software from me, but I, as the developer of it, put in a backdoor because in case you don't pay, I'm going to erase a few of the executables. So backdoors can also be a bit of a challenge as well. The next one, and probably one of the more challenging ones to me, is PUPs, or potentially unwanted programs. Oh my goodness. Anybody who's ever used a Dell computer or a Samsung smartphone probably knows exactly what I'm talking about. A PUP is a piece of software that might have a good use, but it could potentially not have a good use. The term crapware comes up all the time. So what we're talking about is a piece of software, usually like on my phone, it's going to be a piece of software that's going to be trying to do something else. For example, I have cloud services on my phone, and Samsung wants me to use their cloud service. Is it bad? No, but it is potentially unwanted. All right, so PUPs are not necessarily bad programs, they just can be irritating. The next one I want to talk about are bots or botnets. Now, when we talk about bots and botnets, what we're talking about is a bunch of computers that usually have some type of rat running on them that we call zombie computers. So these individual computers, we call them zombies because these programs get installed on them in some secret way, and the users, hopefully, for the denial of service people, don't know this. So they'll just run for days or weeks or months until suddenly the person who's in control of all these zombified computers suddenly press a button, and they do this through a rat usually, and they'll say, start sending a bunch of signals to this www.idon'tlikethesiguys.com. And we get a bunch of these people hitting this, and this is called a denial of service. You have so many people hitting this one web page, it doesn't have the ability to talk to everybody. So a denial of service means to hit a computer with a bunch of computers. A distributed denial of service means you've got lots and lots of these computers that are all zeroing in on one particular system. And these work because these rat programs provide a single command and control where I can, via this rat, basically go, okay, who am I going to attack today? And I can type in this command through my rat and have command and control over all of these different systems. Now, I am not here to get into a big discussion on denial of service attacks. That's going to be in Chapter 8, and Dan's going to go through that in great detail. Do be aware, though, that a bot or a botnet is a bunch of zombified computers, usually infected with some form of rat that is under the command and control of a single entity to perform denial of service attacks. All right. The other one I want to talk about is something called a keylogger. And if you were to say to me, Mike, one of the most nefarious problems we have out there today in malware, and that would be keyloggers. A keylogger can manifest, for example, it's not at all uncommon to see a little device that plugs in between your keyboard and your computer itself. And these little tiny dongles, as they're called, can actually capture every key that's being pressed. And a lot of these even have wireless access points built into them so that they can remotely, or you might have to be out in the parking lot with a antenna, but you can get those guys to phone home and tell you what that particular computer's been typing. The other form of keylogger is going to be some type of software. Software keyloggers are out there, but they're usually more like, they have good uses. Used like you want to monitor what your kids are doing on their computers and stuff like that. And those are going to be software. The only downside to a software keylogger is that most anti-malware programs can find them pretty easily. Hardware keyloggers are tough because there's very little software that can detect them. But the bottom line is that when you run into keyloggers, do be aware that they can either be software or that they can be hardware. Okay, whoops, all right. All right, next is going to be a rootkit. Rootkit was a big problem 20 years ago. There's a famous story about a company called Sony that installed these pieces of malware on everybody who tried to get certain Sony movie CDs, but those days are over. Anyway, a rootkit is kind of sort of an halfway invisible piece of malware. The secret of a rootkit is it is a virus that is got one major goal, and that is to get root access to the system. We usually see rootkits installed on the boot of the actual systems that they're trying to attack, because that's the great place. If I can get this piece of malware started even before the operating system's going, I can usually hide myself in some pretty clever places. We don't see rootkits on desktop computers very much anymore, but on smartphones, in particular with Androids, this is still an ongoing issue. All right, so the last one I want to talk about is something called a logic bomb. Now, a logic bomb, when you look at a logic bomb, to me it looks like an old bomb. Remember the old bombs that they were round and they had the fuse sticking out of them? The only challenge to a logic bomb is that it isn't a virus in that it doesn't replicate, but it does activate. And logic bombs pretty much universally have some form of timer. And on this timer, it will be set to number of logins, maybe a piece of software. It could be a certain time, like 30 days after it's installed. There's a lot of different things that can come in there. But the bottom line is a logic bomb, to me, it's really more of a Trojan with a timer for naughty activation. And you got to be careful with these things because when they blow up, they could end an episode. Ah! People, I said Trojan horse. This is clearly a bear, a Trojan bear.